this week. A lot of academic stuff to stay on top of and finish up here. I think all of our guys are finished, and it's always an interesting week when you're trying to balance academics, guys finishing with preparation for your next opponent. So obviously Minnesota has played a really challenging schedule, and they play a lot of games away from home. Everyone that's been to their venue knows it's a pretty special place to play, great environment. Been really impressed with them collectively. They're a different team this year, obviously, with the guys they lost, but they're physically really, really tough. Obviously, Daniel's the sophomore big has just been outstanding. Has had an outstanding start, but they've got a transfer car that's really playing well for them, shooting on the perimeter, and a physical presence to them that Richard Pitino's teams typically have, a physical presence and a physical toughness to them. That's typically what you see with his guys. You can tell they're coached to play that way. I've got great appreciation and respect for that. So it's going to be a great challenge. Tough-minded, well-coached team, and we need to be ready to go on Sunday night.
How have you approached having days in between games when you're playing really well and you hit a break like that? Do you dial in on some things you haven't been able to address that? Are you shoring up things that you've noticed through 9 games? What do you try to do when you have a chance to catch a break like this?
Well, we you know, as a coach, you're looking at things that maybe you feel like you have not addressed properly at the beginning of the week to kind of set the table for your week. So, you know, we looked at some special situation stuff, end of game stuff, just because we've not had a lot of situations where we've had game up to this point to where it's been, you know, last 3 minutes of 1 or 2 possession game. So we've not had great practice with that. So we've tried to do that the last couple of days. You know, we tried to give them some, we did a skill workout yesterday instead of practice. So we tried to break up the week a little bit. We gave them some time off early in the week for finals. So you're always worried about, you know, their conditioning level. What is it? Obviously, you know, it's a good decision not to play, but you know, when you're playing well, you'd like to keep playing as much as possible.
The success that you've had to this point this season, how much is that a reflection of the fact that you have versatile guys who've been able to try out a lot of different lineups and combinations that teams can't really just scheme for 1 or 2 lineups that you've been able to mix and match more than you have in the past?
You know, I'm not sure. It's a good question. I don't know how much that would be attributing to. I think it's been beneficial for us, no question. As we talked about last year, our offense was, you know, we all know it was pretty one-dimensional. We didn't get to the foul line enough. We didn't have enough diversity in the ways that we could attack people. So hopefully the increase in some of the diversity in our lineup will affect that, but I don't know if we'll know that, you know, for sure here until, you know, we're a month from now.
Kyle mentioned teams can start to get complacent in December. With the success you guys have had, obviously the guys know you're undefeated, they've seen the rankings, they're on social media. How do you keep their heads to what got them there as opposed to starting to buy into that kind of hype?
I think that's a constant challenge for any coach. You know, the ability to handle success is often harder than you know, being able to deal with adversity. Both present challenges equally, for sure, in different ways. You know, the reality is there's not been a Big Ten win on the road this year. It's 10-0 at home. And, you know, we had 1 loss at this point last year. And So I think, you know, you're trying to focus in on you know, the day in front of us. That's kind of been our mantra for as long as we can remember. I've tried to stay away from diving in. We've certainly talked about the maturity that's required in handling success. And you know, everybody loves the analogy of poison, and I think there's some real truth to that. If you're constantly reading about your own success, there's no question that can affect any mind. But you know, the reality is, we better have a hunger group, especially if you're going to have a chance in the Big Ten on the road.
And obviously, Dwayne's hot shooting has been key for you guys. When you have a guy like that who you put in the starting lineup, he's really started to heat up. Is there anything to, hey, maybe this guy's better starting, and Andre, you know, is a guy who can come in and do some things off the bench, or these matchups work together better? I mean, how do you kind of look at that when a guy's been successful?
Yeah, we just kind of, since we went that direction before the Villanova game, I think we've just kind of, actually it was game before the Villanova game, but since we went in that direction, we've just kind of stayed with it and not really put a whole lot of thought into it, because you're really talking about, you know, the first 4 or 5 minutes of the game, which you want to get off to a good start, but it's not the be all end all. It's a 40-minute game, so we really love Andre's versatility to be able to really sub in for either at the perimeter spot or the forward spot, and his leadership with some of the freshmen that we have coming off the bench as well, pretty early. I think that's been vital for us. And Dwayne's obviously been in a good rhythm here, you know, starting, playing with confidence offensively. He needs to get better defensively, but he's been good offensively.
That dynamic you talk about there with Andre, it's sort of bringing in your most experienced player with your least experienced player oftentimes. How do you see that, or how have you seen that help the young guys in these moments where you have something with Andre?
Well, even though he's not the most vocal, and that's an understatement probably, but he connects out there on the floor, Andre. So he's got a real ability, I've said this, just to connect, particularly defensively. He's not out of position a whole lot. He understands our scheme really well, sees things, and when you're out there with 2 other freshmen, that's really, really important, because the reality is they don't see things. You know, that's the reality. They don't see things when they need to see it as early as they need to see it, particularly on the defensive end. So I think that's why it's felt right, at least at this point, to keep it like it has been.
And you mentioned earlier your ability to get to the free throw line. I think you're like 40%-ish free throw rate right now. It's obviously really good. What's a number that would make you happy, even if your 40% can't be, you know, you can't hold it for the entire season? Somewhere around there, is that where you'd like to be? And just what have you thought about that ability?
You know, it's an interesting question. It's really been more about, you know, are we getting there more than the opponent attempts? I have to go back and look, Bill, at our previous years, some of our teams that got to the foul line consistently, and see what our season high total was, and see what percentages I'd probably feel most comfortable with. You know, I do think that, and I've not done it, but if we were to look at us through 9 games last year, you would probably see a trend of us not getting there, as I remember talking about it earlier, us not getting there as much as I would have liked to. So it's been encouraging, and I think DJ and EJ have helped to that end, because those guys, the addition of those guys, along with Caleb, has improved that number.
I wanted to talk to you about the way you guys are scoring right now. A couple of years ago, I mean, I know he wasn't the only guy, but Keita Bates-Diop was your Big Ten Player of the Year, and it was like you watched your team. If you needed a bucket, you're going to Keita.
Yeah.
And I know you mentioned you haven't been in a lot of, you know, crunch time situations, but you do have plays you draw up after the game. We
Yeah.
talk about, you know, some of your assistants calling up plays. Do you look at, so I think you go down to E.J. Liddell, and he's averaging 7.5. You can probably envision him maybe leading the team in scoring one of these games
Sure.
later in the season.
Yep.
Do you look at this as an advantage right now with these
The
multitude
balance.
of guys that you can maybe rely on to hit a shot?
Yeah, I do, and I think that the numbers may level out to some degree, but I agree with you on a guy like EJ. I think we could see very possibly in January or February that he's one of, if not our leading scorer in certain games as he continues to get better. I think that's very possible. And I think we'll continue to see, I think some guys continue to grow in that area, and other guys, maybe their numbers level off a little bit. But certainly in our minds, we have a few guys that we feel like when we're in those late game situations, we want to try to put the ball in their hands. And that's, as a coach, you're always trying to evaluate that as you go through the early part of the season and in practice. Where do you want the ball, and whose hands do you want it in certain situations? Because if it's just one guy, then it's pretty easy for the defense to know where that thing's going.